Mentioned before, spent 3 years on Nauru, thanks to the policies of the coalition government in 2001, and the complicity of the ALP as well. And also with him is Altaf and John, who also spent 3 and I think 4 years on Nauru for the same reasons. And Senator Andrew Bartlett from the Democrats here as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, and pay respect to the millennia of faithful guardianship that they have seen over this land, and the ongoing role they play in this country today and into the future. John Howard might refuse to acknowledge the outrages done to our First Peoples in the past, and he might genuinely not know what an apology is, but I am sorry for what has gone before. And as someone who has benefited from the injustice of the past, and someone who's lived a very privileged life built on those injustices, I do say sorry. I apologise on my own behalf, and the Democrats join. Thank you all for coming along. I know it's been a long campaign already, and most people were pretty much sick of it before it was officially called. What we are hearing through the media is a litany of false choices: Howard versus Rudd, Howard versus Costello, security versus freedom, environment versus the economy. When the real choice is whether we decide to spend the next 3 years. Thanks, Ewan. And a candidate for Morton, Emad Solomon, thank you very much. When the real choice is whether we decide to spend the next 3 years sitting on our asses, alternately applauding or complaining about the government we've elected, or if we choose to get up and make our voices heard. I also acknowledge that Ewan I've known for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years out on the campaign trail, and all the campaigns he mentioned before: Indigenous rights, refugee rights, environmental rights, and I do pay tribute to his commitment to the causes. The core tenet of the Australian Democrats is the belief that all Australians should be as involved in politics as they want, and that's never seemed a more revolutionary idea than it does today. I was one of the organisers of the February 16th Peace Rally in 2003, which is part of the biggest global action for peace ever, and certainly one of Queensland's largest peace rallies. Somewhere between 50 and 100,000 Queenslanders marched in Brisbane alone against the upcoming war in Iraq. And when we got home, we were told by our Foreign Minister, the foremost diplomat in our land, that we'd all been supporting Saddam Hussein. And then John Howard turned around and dismissed us as a mob. The coalition government has soiled the word choice. When they talk of it, they mean a choice between their policies or something unimaginably awful. Work choices neatly packages the right to accept a one-sided contract with the right to face unemployment. An unemployment where you could actually have your first check or your first 3 checks docked for turning down that one-sided contract. The Marriage Amendment Act, again passed with Labor, offered the gay, lesbian, bisexual and transgender community the choice between loving and fulfilling relationships or faking heterosexuality. Our Attorney General, whose name I can barely bring myself to speak, once described Cheyenne Madry, who was a 7-year-old boy who grew silent, then still, then catatonic while locked up in detention in our name. Philip Ruddock described him as it 3 times in one interview. And this man and his cronies get to decide what love is in our country. Refugees are offered the choice of returning to the oppressive regimes and the violence that they fled, or staying in one of our detention centres forever, as one of our recent, a court case 3 years ago said that they actually absolutely had the statutory right to lock people up forever in detention centre who committed no crime. In 2001, I first became party politically active, over the government's craven politicising of refugees. People fleeing unimaginable horrors we'd soon be claiming to fight 2 wars to end. I stood up then not only because the actions of John Howard and his government were unconscionable, and not just because the silence of the ALP was disgraceful, and not even just because it was the right thing to do. I stood up because it was the slippery slope we were on. And if anyone, anywhere, could be so completely demonised, so completely cut off from the media and the public, and so successfully, then it would provide a a blueprint for the future for use at home as well as overseas. And since then, that blueprint has been used on students, migrants, those on welfare, single parents, same-sex couples, the young, the old, and then every worker in the country. Small business owners have come to us and said they didn't want work choices. They didn't want to lose the choice to treat their workers fairly. But under the new regime, with so many protections removed, if one of their rivals cuts costs by slashing workers' entitlements, the choice they would be left with is to do the same or to fold. The unions did a good job of getting as many people onto new agreements before work choices came in. And between that and the current boom, most people have been shielded from the true extent of these laws. But the boom isn't going to last. The current agreements will expire, and the true nature of these laws will hit us all, directly or through those we know and love. Underlying every policy debate in Australia is the presumption, which is getting more and more laughable every day, that the Liberal Party will always do what's in the best interest of the economy, and that whatever is in the best interest of the economy is in the best interest of the country. No one's disputing that a strong and stable economy is good for Australia. No one's claiming that economic growth must be ended, but it's past time to ask, is focusing on the economy to the exclusion of all our social issues really what we want or need from government? Why, after a record period of prosperity and growth, is it getting harder for our families to make ends meet? Why is the gap between rich and poor getting wider? The benefits of a strong economy may trickle down to the bottom of our society, but we can't forget that poverty reaches up and out. Crime, violence and social dysfunction affect us all. Desperation in any of us affects us all. We can't turn our backs on the disadvantaged by telling ourselves that eventually the flow-on effects of a robust economy will reach them, because in that lag time, lives are destroyed. You can't protect our country by shrinking its borders. You can't protect our freedoms by removing our rights. You can't secure peace by waging illegal, immoral and ongoing one-sided wars. The Australian Parliament, with Labor supporting the coalition, has now made law guilt by association, detention without crime and secret detention. Australia is the only developed country without a Bill of Rights, and every day we find out that more of the freedoms we took for granted were guaranteed by nothing. We need a Bill of Rights, not one imposed from above by any party, but one that has been developed with the community. We need avenues for the government to have their say, like citizens-initiated referenda and direct democracy, in the event that their representatives fail to represent them. We need an Australian head of state. We need an ABC that is independent of any party or government, one that is adequately funded to provide meaningful Australian content that challenges and informs, educates and entertains, and one that can do that through whichever medium the future demands. We need an ABC that can be relied upon to take any government and all parties to account without fear or favour. We need to have a public service, once again, that can give honest advice to government without worrying that it will lead to repercussions for their careers. We need federal public interest whistleblower laws so public servants who do expose government lies and misdeeds are protected from doing their duties, not demonised or dismissed. We need meaningful and enforceable climate change goals. Now, not for 30 or 40 years or 50 years down the track, when those making the promises aren't around to be held to account. We all need to work towards those goals, industry, agriculture, government and all citizens together, to move our country onto a sustainable footing that will see us into the next century and beyond. We need to constantly examine and uphold our democracy. True choice isn't about going to the ballot box every 3 years and having to choose the lesser of two evils. And it's not giving whoever wins the election an open-ended mandate to do whatever they want, including extreme and secret policies like work choices that were never mentioned during the campaign. At an election, we have the choice to tell the major parties, major in name only, that the Australian public wants a democracy, not a dictatorship. We want representatives of the people in Parliament, not representatives of special interests or party drones. Up to the end, is that 1 minute or the end? 1 minute. Our rights and freedoms lost in the name of the war on terror didn't go because no one saw what was happening. They were lost because parliamentarians who did see sat down, shut up and voted as they were told. Not told by the people of the country, but by the people higher up in their party. When a democracy is working properly, people don't need to trust politicians, they only need to trust themselves. And our democracy is not working. So I'd ask you to vote for me in Brisbane and then vote for Andrew Bartlett in the Senate.